The city of Aachen was a skeleton, and Helga Schmidt was a ghost haunting its bones. Winter 1945 had stripped the last leaves from the charred trees, leaving them to claw at a sky the color of slate. She huddled with her two children, 7-year-old Lucas and 4-year-old Anna, in the damp, frigid cellar of what was once their neighbor's home. Theirs was a pile of bricks 2 streets over. Hunger was a constant gnawing presence, a cold animal coiled in their bellies. Helga gave the children the last of the stale bread, watching them devour the crumbs with a desperation that broke her heart. Anna's cough was a dry, rattling sound that echoed in the silence. Lucas, old and solemn in his new role as the man of their tiny broken family, rarely spoke. He just watched his mother's face, his eyes mirrors of her own fear. That fear had been carefully cultivated. For months, the voice of propaganda minister Goebbels had been their only companion on the radio, his words painting a terrifying picture of the approaching enemy. The American hordes are not soldiers, they are gangsters and criminals. His voice had hissed from the wireless set before it went silent. They come not to liberate, but to destroy. They will defile our women, enslave our men, and steal our children for their dark purposes. Now, the gangsters were here. Helga could hear the rumble of their trucks and the sharp, foreign cadence of their language through the cellar grate. Every time a pair of army boots stomped past, she would pull Lucas and Anna tighter, her body a fragile shield against the monsters she'd been taught to expect. Her despair was absolute. She was a widow in a dead city, protecting her starving children from an enemy she believed was inhuman. Sergeant Mike Riley ran a hand over his face, the stubble rasping against his calloused palm. The cold of Aachen had seeped into his bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill he still carried from the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge had left scars on his soul, the image of frozen bodies in the snow, the constant fear in the endless white forests, the friends who were there one minute and gone the next. He was tired. Tired of death, tired of rubble, tired of the very smell of war. His patrol moved slowly through the skeletal streets. The orders from Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force were unambiguous. General Eisenhower's own proclamation was tacked to every command post bulletin board, the non-fraternization policy. It was strict and clear. No smiling, no handshaking, no conversations beyond what was necessary, and absolutely no giving of aid. They were an army of occupation, not a charity. The Germans had started this war. They could live with its consequences. Mike understood the logic. He'd seen what the Nazis had done. But logic was a cold comfort when he saw a German child with hollow eyes and stick-thin limbs, shivering in rags. The child looked no different from his own nephew back in Ohio. The policy said German. His eyes just saw child. The conflict churned inside him, a battle between a soldier's duty and a man's conscience. That night, by the light of a single candle, he wrote in his journal, "Patrolled the western sector of Aachen today. Orders are orders, but they feel wrong. We are told to be hard, to remember what they did. I remember. I remember every day. But when I see these kids, they didn't do any of it. Saw a woman today with 2 little ones huddled in a doorway. The little girl couldn't have been older than my sister's kid, Mary. She had the same big, scared eyes. How do you look at that and do nothing? How does an order command you to unlearn your own humanity?" A few days later, Helga was forced into the open. The last of their water was gone. Clutching a rusty bucket, with Lucas's small hand in hers and Anna wrapped in a thin blanket on her hip, she crept towards a public pump a block away. The streets were eerily quiet. Suddenly, a jeep rounded the corner and screeched to a halt. 4 American soldiers. 4 of Goebbels' monsters. Helga froze, her blood turning to ice. She instinctively pulled Lucas behind her, shielding him with her body. The soldiers dismounted, rifles held loosely. One of them was Sergeant Riley. He saw the raw terror on the woman's face, the way she clutched her children as if he were a wolf about to pounce. He saw Anna's pale face and the tremor in Lucas's lip. His squadmates looked at him, then at the family. An unspoken tension hung in the air. This was the moment of decision. Duty versus humanity. Slowly, deliberately, Mike Riley let his rifle hang on its strap. He held up an empty hand to show he meant no harm. He walked not towards Helga, but a few feet to the side. He knelt, unbuckling a pouch on his belt. From it, he pulled a small, brown-wrapped block, a D-ration chocolate bar. Standard issue. Bitter, waxy, and designed for survival, not pleasure. To a starving child, it was a feast. He looked at Lucas, who peeked out from behind his mother's skirt. The sergeant didn't smile. That was against the rules. He simply held out the chocolate bar. Helga was paralyzed. A trick? Was it poison? She looked from the chocolate to the soldier's face. She saw no malice, no cruelty. She saw only an exhaustion that mirrored her own, and a profound, undeniable sadness. In that moment, the face of the monster cracked, revealing the face of a man. She gave a barely perceptible nod. Lucas, his hand trembling, stepped forward and took the bar. He scurried back to his mother, clutching the offering as if it were a holy relic. Helga stared at Sergeant Riley, her lips parted to speak, but no words came. Instead, a single, hot tear traced a clean path through the grime on her cheek. Then another. They were not tears of fear, but of a shattering, overwhelming relief that left her shaking. Sergeant Riley stood, gave a curt nod, and walked back to the jeep. No one in his squad said a word. The corporal stared straight ahead, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The young private looked down at his own pack, at the extra pair of socks and the can of peaches he had inside. The silence was not one of condemnation, but of complicity. An unspoken agreement had been forged. The next day, a different patrol accidentally dropped a wool army blanket near a bombed-out apartment where a family was living. A week later, a mess cook spilled a pot of leftover stew where civilians were known to scavenge. These small acts of rebellion, of humanity, were happening all across the front. Reports were trickling up the chain of command, forcing men like General Eisenhower to confront a difficult truth. You could order a soldier not to fraternize, but you could not order him to stop being human. The policy was already beginning to fray at the edges, worn down by thousands of individual acts of compassion. For Lucas, the world had been turned upside down. The enemy, the faceless demon from the radio, had a face. It was the face of the tired man who had given him chocolate. He broke the bar into 3 pieces, giving the largest to Anna and a piece to his mother before taking his own. The bitter, dense chocolate was the most magnificent thing he had ever tasted. It was the taste of hope. The monster was gone, replaced by a confusing, profound question. 2 days later, Sergeant Riley's patrol passed through the same ruined square. He found himself scanning the doorways, though he wasn't sure why. Suddenly, a small figure darted out from the rubble. It was Lucas. He ran not with fear, but with purpose. He stopped a few feet from Riley and held out his hand. The sergeant crouched down. In the boy's palm lay a small, crudely carved wooden bird. Its wings were uneven and the wood was weathered, but it had been shaped with care. It was the only toy Lucas had, a final gift from his father before he had been sent to the Eastern Front. It was everything he had. Riley looked from the bird to the boy's earnest face. He gently took the small object. The chocolate had been an act of pity, a gift from a victor to the vanquished. This This was an exchange between equals. A one-sided act of charity had become a moment of shared humanity. He closed his hand around the tiny bird and nodded to the boy. Danke, he whispered, one of the few German words he knew. Lucas beamed, a true child's smile in a city that had forgotten how to, and then ran back to the shadows. That night, Mike Riley added one last entry to his journal, the small wooden bird resting beside it. He gave me a bird, a little wooden bird. It weighs almost nothing, but it feels heavier than my rifle. We have orders for fighting, for marching, for occupation, but there are no orders for how to build a peace. Today, I think I learned. It doesn't start with generals and treaties. It starts in a ruined street, with a piece of chocolate and a small wooden bird. It starts when you stop seeing an enemy and see a person instead.